Welcome to the Pineapple Perspective with your host, truly Troy Hooper. This is always sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. We're a Japanese fast casual brand growing rapidly through the franchise model in North America and beyond, with 540 restaurants now in 17, about to be 19 countries. If you're interested in expanding your portfolio in the multi-unit restaurant franchisee business, please check out pepperlunchrestaurants.com. Today, another great show. Somebody I've known for a long time. We've had a number of interactions and referring each other and checking in with each other and sort of thought leadership together in the industry. I think he should be far more famous than he is. So hopefully this show makes him much better known, because he deserves it given his long history in the hospitality business. But we want to welcome today Andrew Parr. Andrew, how are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks, Troy. I know I was thinking about it earlier today. It's 10 years that we've known each other now.
Holy moly. That's incredible. We'll be full disclosure. I worked with Andrew's wife, Jody. Hi, Jody. In Breckenridge, Colorado, a long, long time ago. And my wife did too. And I got to know these kids, and they've stuck around the Denver area for a long, long time. And we moved back to California, but always great to catch up with Andrew. And I'm really glad to have him on the show. He brings a lot of thought leadership. He brings a lot of experience as a firsthand operator, manager, and leader in this industry, but also has spent a lot of his career in consulting and now coaching. And we'll talk about what that means. What's the difference between those two things? But Andrew, we start our show off every time asking everybody the exact same question. We'd love your perspective on, what does hospitality mean to you?
Hospitality means to me, I look at it in a question form, and it's sort of like the answer is yes. What is the question? I think that it's truly meeting people where they are and really providing the experience that they're looking for in the moment. So it doesn't matter whether it is a fast casual dining experience or a Michelin-starred James Beard award-winning restaurant. The experience is the guests to ask for and receive. And I think that that's really important, to understand why they're there, what they want, what they're celebrating, even if they're just celebrating having a good day, and really delivering that to them without them having to ask much of us in return.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Shows your chops in the full service business with that mindset. Tell us where that ideology came from. Where does that belief system start from? Where's the impetus of that spark that made you believe that?
It's kind of funny. I think we all in some ways have humble roots. My humble roots were working for an Applebee's franchise group in the Phoenix market when I was younger. And the leadership in that group was truly outstanding. And whether it was Tom Peters and the Pursuit of Wow, anything along those lines, we had what we called a wow culture. And it's really interesting going back and reading what's current now, especially with Will Guardia. Part of our wow culture was, we were a Coca-Cola house. So if somebody wanted Pepsi, we had a 12-pack of Pepsi in the walk-in. If it was raining outside, didn't happen often in Phoenix, but if it was raining, we would offer to walk someone to their car with an umbrella. And so what is current and relevant now in terms of hospitality conversations was really something that I learned very early on from my mentors.
Well, I think that the most unexpected is the most hospitable. And to your point, I would never expect Applebee's to walk to me into my car with an umbrella. And I would never expect Applebee's to be carrying a competitive product just to keep us happy. But I think it speaks a lot about, that group obviously setting the bar to differentiate themselves, right? To elevate beyond the basics. I mean, as a franchisee, the goal is not to live the basics of the brand. The goal is to execute at the highest possible level and elevate the brand and bring that leadership and make the brand better. Most innovations that happen in the franchise brand business come from the franchisees. They suggest
Absolutely.
great things. And I can tell you at Pepper Lunch, we've had it recently, and I'm really excited that we're embracing some of the things that have been put in front of us and suggested to us or offered. And, when the franchisee says, not only do I have a great idea, but I'll be the test, I'll be the guinea pig, I'll even fund it, I'll do it and just let you know how it goes. But we'd love to be a part of the conversation. So I think it's all important stuff. That's pretty cool. Let's set the bar so people know a little bit about Andrew. Talk to us about, thank you for the introduction to your impetus of, getting in this business at the Applebee's level, but give us not your whole full, resume necessarily, but give us a little bit about who Andrew is and how he's come to be this longtime hospitality expert and end up where you are today with your own practices.
Yeah, it's it's ironic in some ways. My younger brother knew from the time he was 14 or 15 years old that he was going to be in the industry. When other kids were out caddying or having paper routes, he was, peeling potatoes and chopping onions in somebody's kitchen. When other kids were going to visit traditional four-year universities, he was looking at Culinary Institute and other trade schools like that. Back then, Culinary Institute wasn't even offering a four-year program. I was much more academic. I have a double major in history and psychology from Wisconsin. I have a law degree from Mitchell-Hamblin University School of Law. And working in restaurants and in hospitality had always been how I had paid my way through my education. I almost backed into the industry. And like I said, I worked on the franchise side for Applebee's. I've worked for independent owners and operators for concepts as big as something like Punch Bowl Social that were, behemoth 35,000 square foot venues. I've been in the hotel world. I worked for Marriott out in Hartford, Connecticut as a director of food and beverage, and then also at a smaller property here in Golden, Colorado at the Golden Hotel. I had started picking up random projects here and there. People would call and say, hey, I need help with that, with, this or that or whatever. And so doing that kind of project work really got me thinking, like, okay, do I want to be working until 2:00 in the morning, closing down restaurants, doing that whole thing? And I was able to bridge with all of my experience and knowledge that gap from going from operating day to day to being able to support people who are operating day to day.
That's amazing. So we'll get into at the end of this a little bit about your practice, but basically today, for quite a while, you've had your own consulting practice where you've helped particularly new concept development, build out some really awesome venues and really cool concepts with chef-driven menus and designs. And in the last couple of years, you decided to pivot and add or somewhat replace, but add. I think you're probably always going to do both. Coaching, and we'll get into that now. Is I had a consulting practice. We specialized in emerging brand scaling. We brought the outsourced C-suite SWAT team into your business and sat next to the founding group and operating team. And we helped them level their business up and prepare for high scale growth, usually funded by private equity and venture capital. And we provided that really sort of rapid deployment of education, information, and resources to the table. Very specialized form of consulting that we did for quite a while. What is your form of consulting? And then tell us the difference between consulting and coaching, because I'm really excited because I know you're doing quite a bit of that now.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of three-pronged. There's coaching, there's advisory, and there is consulting. And coaching to me is very client-driven, focused on what their needs are as an owner, an entrepreneur, a leader, and having people work very specifically on unlocking their own potential. And by being able to do that, thinking deeper and wider and really engaging in possibility thinking, it allows you to really 10x your business by really being introspective and thinking about yourself. Advisory is more specialized resource providing within a specific line of business. So it is coaching, but on another level where it's more, instead of working with the client, to have them find the answers that are most meaningful to them. It's based on experience and saying, okay, I've been through this 17 times, 12 different ways, and these are the choices you can make, and these are the likely outcomes that will happen. And consulting is really providing solutions. Like the owner operator says, I have a food cost problem. I don't know how to solve it. I need you to come in and do it for me. Or, like you said just a few minutes ago, I've worked with a number of concepts from real estate search through opening day and really laying that entire framework for how to get from, okay, I have this thought process on a cocktail napkin and I want to open my own business, and then providing all of the tools and resources within that time frame to get that accomplished.
So why did you pivot or start to focus on coaching? Because you just added coaching specifically in the last couple of years. I know you're having a big impact with a couple, even somebody I know that we share in common. But why did you pivot to coaching, and what are the outcome differences compared to your longtime consulting practice?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, from the invest in yourself point of view, two prongs there. One is that I think that we spend not nearly enough time focusing on continuing to be curious and learn and develop ourselves and continue to grow. And then the other, from the actual financial investment, it's a whole lot less expensive to engage in coaching than it is to pay for someone to fix the problem. Then additionally, I've always been really focused on working one-on-one, which is maybe why I'm not as famous. And I'm not, speaking to crowds of 2,500 people. And I'm actually, even on the consulting side, I've been an independent service provider. I do a lot of hand holding. Like I said, when I was talking about hospitality, meeting people where they are, 8 years ago, I had a client who was a single father with a 5-year-old son who often found it most convenient to talk at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. If you go with a much larger firm, you're not typically going to get that level of access. And so, having been so driven by the individual, this gives me that opportunity to really focus on the relationship with the person, who they are and where they want to go, as opposed to it being transactional. Here's your employee documentation. Here's your employee handbook. I also like the opportunity with coaching for it to really be a much longer term relationship than saying, okay, you're open now. Here's your toolbox. Please use it. You paid for it.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I would agree there that you can have a bigger, longer lasting impact in the mindset and movement of a person's behaviors and their thought process and how they approach or how they review or how they analyze things. But you're right. Most people go out and buy a bunch of these books. There's quite a few on the shelf behind me, right? And look, I'm a product of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits, but I was also 24 years old and came across it by accident. Nobody had even told me I needed to professionally invest in myself over time, and that really opened that jar, right? And then Procter and Gamble, and then subsequently Hilton, and some really big corporations that do understand the power of investment. But how do you find these independents or small group owners come to decide that they need this kind of support, that they need somebody to talk to and walk them through a process to get out of either toxic mindset, limiting mindset, coming from a world where they just weren't invested in? Because the reality is most people in the hospitality industry ladder up by spending the most time and putting in the most hours and being the most reliable. Nobody really puts us through, quote unquote, the university of, how to do this job 101. Obviously, you and I, when we had this opportunity, it was a 2-year vocational. Now it is a 4-year bachelor's and master's degree in hospitality. So it's a very different world in the academic side. But how did they come to find you, and what are they looking for, and what are you sort of seeing as a consistent thread across the opportunity? And then talk a little bit on the backside about some wins, some impacts, some some results that come out of that, so people kind of can see the arc of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most common thread that's drawn throughout my clientele is that in a lot of instances, whether it was a good environment or not that they grew up in, or the number of different companies that they've worked for, going from being in an environment where you have 2, 3, 4 levels of bosses who are theoretically supporting you or providing answers to questions or a framework to work within, whether it's, your daily checklists or the basics or whatever it is, you get to the point where you are ready to go out on your own. And you go out on your own, and all of a sudden you realize that it's really lonely. You're talking to your mentor far less, or now your mentor's 3,000 miles away, and you find that you don't have, for better or worse, that level of support that you did previously. So really being able to look for that thought partnership that might be missing from your director of operations or whoever that person was that provided it for you, and saying, okay, I need a mirror, I need a sounding board, I need someone who can have these conversations with me. To me, the key point is being able to ask them the questions that they need to be thinking about and driving their thought process, right? So I'm not telling anybody how to think, but by asking the right questions helps them move from that transactional mindset of, oh, I have to fill out the manager log before I leave, or I have to shuttle product from one store to the next store, or doing all of these things that are best served by somebody else in their organization, and taking them to that ownership level of understanding, I am responsible for driving vision, I'm responsible for driving culture, I'm responsible for driving training programs, for overall process, for marketing, for revenue growth. I'm not responsible for walking into one of my restaurants and seeing that there's a dirty glass that's been on a table for 3 minutes, right? That becomes a coaching moment, not a doing moment. And so those are some of the processes that people are really looking to acquire when they're looking to work with me as their executive coach.
When they find you and they get engaged and they get started, do you find that they think the problem is one thing, but really they don't see the root cause and they don't see that bigger picture, and they're really just focused on the symptoms, not the disease, so to speak, whether it's in their own mind or in their organization or in their culture or how they were brought up, that kind of environment?
I think that's often the case. And along with that, I think oftentimes people can get trapped in a thought process of, I need to either do this or I need to do that. And then sometimes this or that ends up being the better of two evils, as opposed to really engaging in possibility thinking. And the analogy that I use is kind of like the fantasy football draft board, or if you're putting together a menu for the first time, right? You're not choosing between this or that. You're choosing among the entire universe of possibilities. And once you've got that all out, then you're working on bringing it back in and narrowing it down to what the best options are. But if you're not first considering all of the possibilities, then you're in a situation where you could be losing out on what best serves you and best serves your business, because you're trapped thinking it's either this or that, and it rarely is.
Let's give this audience a freebie. Culture building has been this continuous topic for probably forever, but I keep coming across it. I keep being asked to talk about it at conferences and on panels and things. And a lot of people are still struggling with the idea of, where does culture start and how do I drive culture as a leader? How do I develop leaders in my organization to carry the torch and really spread the gospel of this culture that we've developed, whatever that is within your business? Talk a little bit about that challenge and why do so many leaders struggle to either see the value of it and poo-poo it. You know, they're all like, kumbaya, we're all not just going to sit around and have milkshakes together all day and talk about our feelings. That's not building culture necessarily in and of itself either. But talk a little bit about that exercise and why so many folks struggle with it. And then talk a little bit about like why it matters, because at the end of the day, it drives results.
Absolutely. And I think here's the deep, dark secret is that whether you're focused on culture or not, for whatever reasons you choose, you have a culture. It exists with or without you. So why not act intentionally to build the culture that you want? And the culture that you want should be reflective of your values. Your company values should be reflective of your values. A lot of it is, how are you showing up for yourself and for other people every day? Are you bringing the energy every day that you want reflected? And one of the lessons I learned very early on is that far more often than not, your staff, your team, so it doesn't matter whether you're a junior floor manager running a shift or whether you're the CEO with other C-suite folks reporting to you, they will mirror your energy. Right? So if the power went out and your POS is down, you're freaking out, your staff is going to freak out. I had the opportunity to work in a restaurant at one point in my career that if there was even a brownout, a flicker, we would lose power. So I became very accustomed to what happens on a shift and how you move forward when the POS goes down. And this is when the POSs were like, there was one master, and then they all, as one would come up, then the next one would come up, the next one would come up. So then if you tried to pull a check up from one that wasn't loaded yet, you screwed up the whole guest check, right? So for better or worse, I became very adept at managing and leading through that situation. And so auditing your energy and understanding how people are seeing you is super important. I think the ability to request what I call mirror moments, right? So you go to the people that you're working with and ask them to give you feedback, honest feedback, not flattery, not blowing smoke. This is, how do you think I reacted in that situation? What was my energy level like when I came into the meeting? What am I missing? Watching your facial expressions and your body language, because your voice could be saying one thing, but your body could be saying something very differently. Making sure, you as a speaker understand this very well too. Practicing your presence before your performance. Understanding the way that you're going to be received. And also, to the best of your ability, and especially when you're working with your own team, it's easier than speaking in front of a large group. Understanding how individuals in that group best receive information. Also, it's sort of like in a good training program or a good train the trainer program, it's not as much about the information that you're conveying, but understanding that different people learn differently, different people receive information differently, and you will become more effective if you're able to provide that information in the ways that people receive it. Then I think finally, reclaim your room with curiosity, right? Asking questions. And I can't say it enough, and I say it over and over again. Ask more questions, ask better questions, ask one more question. And I think that if you have that curiosity and you truly are cultivating that as part of your culture, where it's not just you as the leader that is able to be curious, but you're allowing anyone on your team to ask why without becoming defensive, without feeling like they're challenging, but truly understanding they're coming from a perspective of wanting to understand you, wanting to understand the particular program, the policy, the procedure, the real why are we doing this and what is the outcome going to be. I think those are all really significant parts in developing the culture that you want to see in your business.
Those are amazing ideologies that I resonate with all of them and think it's why we've been friends for so long. I absolutely believe all of that is true. I'll even add one, which is, and I didn't invent this, and I'm bad at naming who said what when, so I'm sure people will comment in the comments where the quote comes from. I learned this, in leadership 101, so to speak. When people come to you with a question, how should we do this? Or how does that get done? Or how do you, Mr. Troy, want this done? And I need to do this more and more even recently. And now I say it out loud, I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite. I probably haven't done this too much recently. But one of the best tactics is to not give an answer. It's to ask them what they would do. Well, what do you think's the right way we should handle this? Or what do you think is the people or process or system we need to solve that problem? It could be the smallest question. It could be the biggest macro thing in your business. But let the people that are coming to you, because if they're coming to you to ask, they've drawn up the courage to do so. Hopefully that means you've created some kind of culture of this kind of feedback and acceptance. But if they come to you, they probably thought about it quite a lot, and they probably have an idea.
Absolutely.
And they're looking for validation and confirmation. And if you give it to them and you didn't know it was in their head, then they're like, great, in their head, I was right. That was yay for me. But nobody else knows that. And it's more important that they know that you know that than they know that, because they think they already know it anyway. So give them the validation, give them the confirmation, ask them what they would do. Because you know what? 90+% of the time, they're right. They've got the answer you would have given. And that 10%, they probably have a better answer than you were going to give. They probably had a better idea or a different way or some ideas about the insights on the team. Well, yes, that's a great, but they may not challenge you. In their head, they're going, I knew that's what he was going to say, and that's fine, and we'll go do that. But man, if we could do it this other way, the whole team would buy in, or we get stakeholder buy-in, or everybody would be excited, or we could have more fun, or there's just and this is like filling the fucking ketchup. Like, I don't care what it is, right? Polishing the glasses, when we do something, how we do something, how many people are assigned to do it. These processes, they know better. They're in there every day. Let them bring those solutions to you. You have to open that door by asking them for their ideas and their opinion. And whether that's in the moment, which is what we've been mostly talking about, but you also have to structure it, right? Like, you have to plan it. It has to be on the books, whether it's at the daily lineup, at your one-on-ones, at your manager meetings, your all staff meetings, your food tastings, whatever that is. It has to be constant. It has to be always on.
100%. If your culture lives in a binder on top of the dusty AV rack in the back of the closet, then your culture isn't really living. And like I said, there's a difference between whether culture is happening with you or without you. And the culture that happens without you is not necessarily going to match what you want.
Let's give the audience some examples, because there's only so many that are at least famous. When you say culture, what brands do we all think of in the restaurant industry?
I mean, I think that you think of Will Guardia. I think that, he's a master culture builder. I think that, it's super interesting too, because when you talk about larger corporations, especially corporations that franchise businesses, I think the ones that are strongest in culture are the ones where the franchisor works hand in hand with each franchisee so that it goes unit to unit, right? And that's the thing, like, it doesn't matter. We'll go back to Applebee's. It doesn't matter whether you're the family that will eat at Applebee's, no matter what city you're in, because you think that you're getting the same product and you want that level of comfort. And you know that if you order the Santa Fe chicken, it doesn't matter what state you're in, you're getting it. However, unit to unit operates differently, and the better the franchisor does and the better the higher level leadership does at bringing that down from a philosophy to an actual day-to-day practice is where you get the wins.
Yeah. I mean, look, you just think of Chick-fil-A. I know In-N-Out's not franchise, but I have a story we don't have time for today, but I've told it before. You know, there used to be where I lived most recently before my current home. There were I think 5 or 6 Jack in the Boxes between my house and the freeway, depending on, and you could go about 4 different ways, and you just encounter one. But yet one of them stood out dramatically, and I took note of the name of the franchisee corporation, professionally managed by the franchisee, blah, blah, blah entity, whatever. And I took note of that and I found it again, I don't know, 30 miles away at another Jack in the Box. And I went, here's the difference. I go to 6 Jack in the Boxes. 5 of them are very questionable in my experience, very basic, very blah, very shitty, all the above. I go to this one and it's like a Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, what is going on? These people are, good morning. How are you? Glad to do that for you. Can I get you some extra something? You know what? We threw a hash brown in there. Have a great day. Like, they're just over the top. And I'm just like, and for like years, I lived in this place for 6 years. So, you know, it was just the convenient spot to get that breakfast biscuit. By the way, Jack in the Box, please bring back the breakfast biscuit sandwiches. I understand why you took the biscuits off. They're hard to make consistently in quality, and yours were good. But, you know, it was just the easy thing to do. But my gosh, I mean, it was the Chick-fil-A experience, really, at a random couple of Jack in the Boxes in Southern California. Because to your point, like your Applebee's franchisee, they took the basics and they leveled it up, and they had their own culture and they had their own belief, and they added on to that. Andrew, let's wrap this up and talk about, it's been fantastic. By the way, I think this is going to be highly valuable for everybody who listens. I think we've got to unlock that mindset, give people the permission to be open-minded and come ask for help and look for other people's outside perspective, because that's really what we're doing, is giving outside perspective, whether on this show or your consulting. Talk about how people can find you. Talk about the difference between your consulting practice at Angry Olive and your coaching practice at Blue Unicorn, and make it easy for people to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am at angryoliveconsulting.com. You can email me at andrew@angryoliveconsulting.com. I've actually streamlined it and made it even easier for the folks in the hospitality industry, whether you're looking for consulting or coaching. All of those services are available through angryoliveconsulting.com. So one-stop shop. You don't have to toggle between multiple websites, whether it's individual one-on-one coaching, whether it's enterprise level coaching, where you want to engage coaches for all of your general managers or whatever the case may be. And then consulting projects, you know, like I said, anything from as targeted as I'm having a problem with my food costs to as broad as I want to launch a new restaurant and I need someone to be my backbone to do that.
Awesome stuff. Andrew, awesome to have you on the show. So glad we finally got to do this, and look forward to continuing our friendship and continuing to keep track of what you're doing and what we're doing over here, and hope to have you back on again. Thanks for the time, and thanks for all your thought leadership in this conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Troy. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.